Arguably one of the most popular members of the Bat family is Dick Grayson, the original kid sidekick Robin, who would become a fully fledged superhero in his own right when he reached adulthood. He abandoned his childhood persona for the new identity of Nightwing. However, as popular and long-standing as the character has been in the comic books, I don't think that the DC Animated Universe version of Dick Grayson got a lot of love and attention. In my last video I looked at how Batman the Animated Series' Robin really wasn't all that necessary in the long run, and this time I want to examine how the character evolved in the follow-up show, The New Batman Adventures. So if you've watched my Robin video, then you'll know his comic book origins. Young circus performer Dick Grayson witnessed the murder of his trapeze artist family, and was adopted by Bruce Wayne and trained to help fight a war on crime as Robin the Boy Wonder. However, as time passed, the comic book creative teams wanted to move away from Batman's light-hearted antics of the 1950s and 60s, and the way they achieved that was by shipping Robin off to college, leaving Batman to fight crime on his own. Now, I don't want to spend too much time talking about his comic book appearances because Dick Grayson has appeared in about 10,000 comics to date, and by this point he is a well fleshed out character with a personality and motivations of his own. There is one event I want to talk about, and that's his transition from Robin the Teen Wonder to his own superhero identity, Nightwing. As part of aging Robin up, he would join the new Teen Titans, acting as their leader. A few years into the run, Dick began questioning how he could fight crime as his own man, rather than just doing what Batman had taught him to do. So strong was the link between the Robin identity and Batman that he felt he couldn't continue with it any longer. As such, he decided to adopt a new identity of his own, one inspired by a superhero from the bottled Kryptonian city of Kandor, Nightwing. As an aside, there's a truly wonderful scene from an episode of Teen Titans Go that touches on this idea. It's even drawn in the Batman the Animated Series art style and features Kevin Conroy as Batman in a very rare comedic role. I'll link to it in the info box in the top right corner. If you've never seen it before, do yourself a favour and watch it. After this video though. Anyway, this change in costume led to a change in attitude and an overall improvement in his confidence, giving him his own identity that would allow him to escape from the shadow of his father, Batman. It's a real life experience that many people can doubtlessly relate to. There's this whole thing in young adulthood where people try to establish themselves as their own people, following their own ambitions in life, not just doing what their parents want them to do with their lives. It's why you see so many teens and young adults chasing trends, ironically in an effort to stand out. And in this case, Dick's rebellion came in the form of a wing collar and a little bit later on, a mullet. Later comics, after Crisis on Infinite Earths, which reset much of DC's continuity, would reimagine the split between Batman and Robin as being more hostile, with Batman firing Dick, causing him to run off and create his own identity. Ultimately, the end result was the same. Dick Grayson became his own man. Now, what I find really curious is how the DC Animated Universe version of Nightwing shares many similarities with the comic book storylines, but is actually pretty much the opposite. Their Nightwing never really escaped Batman's shadow. Before getting to that, a brief history lesson. Following the end of Batman the Animated Series in September of 1995, although technically it had been renamed The Adventures of Batman and Robin, but that's a topic for another time, many of the creative team members began work on Superman the Animated Series, while others split off to work on other projects. After a few years of Superman, the executives at Warner Bros. Requested that the team create a new run of Batman. However, the producers had little interest in doing exactly what had come before. Instead, they wanted to show growth and development within their animated universe and cover new ground. This new cartoon, The New Batman Adventures, was, as the title suggests, a brand new show, but still part of the same continuity as Batman the Animated Series. Yes, that's a very important point to make. Despite what the DVD releases say, TNBA is not the same show as BTAS. Almost every character received a significant redesign, some more than others, and the kinds of stories they told differed wildly to what we had seen before. Yes, there were tragic, heartbreaking stories like Growing Pains and Mad Love, but there were also more light-hearted stories that took inspirations from Batman's campy antics in the 50s and 60s, like Joker's Millions and Critters. I would argue that one of the biggest changes came in how they handled Dick Grayson. He was no longer Robin. In fact, Robin was a completely different character, one that was much younger and smaller. He was a little rough around the edges, dressed in a new red, black and yellow costume. The first episode of TNBA Holiday Nights dropped us straight in the deep end with no explanation as to why any of these changes had taken place. Oh, okay, I guess Clayface is alive again somehow. Oh, Robin's a little boy now, and oh my god, what happened to the Joker? But most importantly, there was no sign of Dick Grayson, the former Robin. As an aside, I think the Holiday Nights would have made a better series finale than a first episode, but that's an entirely separate matter. While Dick Grayson would return at the end of the second episode Sins of the Father, which also properly introduced us to the new Robin, we'd have to wait until the episode Old Wounds, which aired almost a year later, to learn why Dick had stopped being Robin. The episode takes place mostly in flashbacks as Dick explains to the new Robin, Tim Drake, why he left and could no longer work with Batman in the way that he once had. Ultimately, there was a breakdown in trust between Batman and Robin. While Batman was beginning to harden in his approach to crime fighting, perhaps the result of too many years of figuratively bashing his head against a brick wall, trying to bring down crime in Gotham, Robin was uncomfortable with this. The biggest issue was that Batman had been keeping secrets from him. Specifically, the secret revolved around Dick's girlfriend, Barbara Gordon. Batman had deduced that Barbara was Batgirl and took her into his confidence, revealing the Batcave to her without telling Dick. When Barbara was knocked off a building while battling the Joker, Dick became enraged with Batman for endangering the life of the woman he loves. At the same time, he felt betrayed by Barbara for not telling him that she was Batgirl, an accusation she immediately turned back on him. He had never told her he was Robin either. The argument culminates in Robin punching Batman, tearing off his cape and domino mask, a symbolic act of rejecting his childhood identity, and diving off the building's edge into the unknown. I think that, at this point, on some level, Dick is aware of the hypocrisy of his argument, but that doesn't change the fact that he feels betrayed by the people he cares about the most. The show never told us what had happened to Dick Grayson after he left Gotham. Fortunately, fans of the tie-in comic books would get an extensive breakdown of what happened between his departure and his eventual return in Batman Adventures: The Lost Years. This 5-issue miniseries attempted to bridge the gap between BTAS and TNBA. The comic adapts the events of Sins of the Father and Old Wounds, but embellishes each story with additional scenes as well as highlighting several adventures that Dick went on while on his journey to discover his true identity. It was written by Hilary J. Bader, who was also a writer on the show, which gives it an air of authenticity and, in my mind, makes it undeniably canon. The first thing to point out is that Dick's journey is very similar to Bruce's. Both left Gotham to travel the world, learning new techniques to improve their abilities. Where Bruce learned from the Master in Nanda Parbat, Yoro Sensei in Japan, and Zatara the Magician, among others, Dick headed south, to the fictional South American country of Santo de la Rosa, where he sought a tribe that lived in the rainforest that was capable of becoming invisible. Along the way, he came across Two-Face establishing his drug empire, and set out to stop him. It's ironic that, of all of Batman's villains, Dick would stumble across Two-Face. Two-Face is arguably one of the villains with the strongest personal connection to Batman. They were best friends before Harvey Dent's face was disfigured in an explosion, and goes to show that as much as Dick might try to get out of Gotham, he'll never truly be able to escape it. Along the way, Dick was injured while trying to escape Two-Face's henchmen, and was rescued by the Invisible Tribe, who took him in and taught him their secrets over the subsequent 2 months. Armed with his newfound skills, Dick was able to sabotage Two-Face's operation, before he continued on his quest to further improve his skills. Dick's global journey of self-improvement eventually brought him to the mountains of Tibet, where a group of monks had reportedly learned the secrets of flight. The monks agreed to share their knowledge with Dick on the condition that he recovered one of their holy relics that had recently been stolen by another rogue with a deep connection to Batman, Ra's al Ghul. And it's so telling that Dick ran into 2 villains that had direct personal connections to Batman. You could argue that this cements the fact that Dick really doesn't have much of an identity of his own, but I suppose at the same time you could look at it as him battling pre-existing foes in a different way. Donning the garments of the monks, which granted a limited flight ability, more like gliding really, Dick tracked Ra's to Gotham, where the two fought over possession of the relic. Ra's revealed that it was constructed from materials infused with the chemicals of the Lazarus Pit, and it could be used to extend his unnaturally long life even further. Dick was able to wrestle the relic from Ra's grip and returned it to where it belonged. At this point, Dick came to the conclusion that he had learned all he needed to learn and decided that it was time that he also went back to where he belonged, Gotham City. And that brings us to the final scene of Sins of the Father, where Dick Grayson casually walks in like a long-lost pet cat, and makes himself at home as if he'd never even left. The Lost Years adds an extra section to this scene, where Tim Drake mistakenly believes that Dick has returned to reclaim the Robin costume, but instead he unveils his new persona, Nightwing. Rather than picking up where he left off, Dick created a new identity, complete with a new costume that blended together the emblem of the Invisible Tribe, the suit of the Flying Monks, and Batman's colour scheme. As much as Dick stated that he wanted to become his own man, in reality he feels more like a Batman tribute act. His new costume is almost entirely black save for a blue emblem on his chest, a far cry from his Robin costume, but not all that different to Batman. Similarly, his attitude and general demeanour are very similar to Batman's. He's no longer the joking sidekick, breaking the tension with his well-observed quips. Instead, he stands silently in judgment, letting his fists do most of the talking. His personality as Nightwing reminds me of the closing moments of Robin's Reckoning Part 2, when Dick gets his hands on the man that murdered his parents, Tony Zuko. Robin toys with Zuko, first by dragging him across the pier on his motorbike, then casually flinging him around before holding him over the edge of the pier. He's cold, threatening, and he almost goes over the edge, but he stops himself before going too far. While Nightwing isn't excessively violent, he is more like Batman than he would likely care to admit. In the episode You Scratch My Back, that similarity to Batman catches the attention of Catwoman. When Catwoman and Nightwing team up, there is obvious sexual tension between the two, but they were both playing each other. For Catwoman, she sees Nightwing as an inexperienced person that she can manipulate into helping her recover stolen goods with her feminine wiles, and make Batman jealous as a bonus. But Nightwing knows exactly who she is and doesn't trust her for an instant. For much of the episode, it seems like Batman and Nightwing have a strained relationship, and that is true to a certain extent, but they're perfectly capable of working together. Perhaps saying it's a strained relationship isn't quite right. Their relationship has developed. Yes, he and Batman concocted the rift between them in order to make Catwoman trust him, but the impression I get is that it didn't require much acting. Regardless, Batman acknowledges that Nightwing is his own man and deserves his own space. Aside from a handful of small roles in episodes like Joker's Millions and Chemistry, Nightwing is used quite sparingly. He has one other starring role in the episode Animal Act, where he learns that his former circus family are under the control of the Mad Hatter after one of their performing apes was caught committing robberies. It's worth noting that Nightwing's appearances in the show revolve around him revisiting old ground. In You Scratch My Back, we touch upon his strained relationships with Batman and Batgirl. In Old Wounds, we dwell on the divisions of Batman and Robin. And Animal Act is all about him revisiting his childhood and finding that it has been corrupted. Outside of this, Nightwing doesn't get used very much. He has a notable blink and you'll miss him cameo in the Justice League Unlimited episode Grudge Match. By this point, Nightwing has left Gotham and is established in Bloodhaven. During the Batman Beyond era, Dick is the only member of the Bat family not to be seen at all. All that remains is his costume in a trophy cabinet and a jacket with his initials on the label. Even after the Bat family reunites following the events of Batman Beyond Return of the Joker, Dick is nowhere to be seen. I think it's safe to assume that Dick gave up on the identity of Nightwing, given that the costume is still in the Batcave, but it is possible that he was out there still trying to make a difference in some other city. The Batman Beyond creative team's refusal to even hint at what happened has led to rampant fan speculation over the years, but nothing was ever confirmed. Nightwing was also sparingly used in the tie-in comics. In fact, in the series Batman Adventures Continue, he made multiple appearances on the covers, but was rarely seen in the stories themselves. And speaking of tie-in comics, doubtlessly some of you will make reference to the Batman Beyond 2.0 comic book that attempted to explain why Dick Grayson left Gotham and was never seen in Batman Beyond. Well, sorry to burst your bubble and put an end to your Bruce Timm-hating mob, but no one connected to the show worked on those comics. They aren't canon and do not count. These are the same comics that changed it so that Warren McGinnis, the new Batman's father, was murdered by the grandson of Joe Chill, the man who murdered the Waynes. There's no shame enjoying those comics, but they are entirely separate from the cartoons, so don't conflate the two. Having said that, that doesn't mean that the DCAU Nightwing can escape controversial content entirely. Nightwing has a substantial role in 2017's Batman and Harley Quinn movie, probably the very last piece of DCAU Batman content ever to be made. And one film that many people may wish wasn't in continuity, but I'm sorry, it totally is. Oh no, I mentioned Batman and Harley Quinn, the Bruce Timm-hating mob is back on. But that is definitely a topic for another time. The DCAU version of Nightwing is a confident and capable hero. There's no denying that. But for as much as he tried to distinguish himself from Batman, the two are very similar. When he experienced his own identity crisis, he travelled the world on a voyage of self-discovery, amassing skills and trickery from some of the world's most secretive people, just as Batman had done in his youth. When he finally felt confident enough to return to Gotham, the new identity he chose for himself bore many similarities to Batman, more so than he would like to admit, no doubt. And I'm not just talking about his appearance. Still, it was a necessary act of self-discovery, as Dick says.
Hey, no one can be a boy wonder forever.
It seems that the only way for Dick to escape from Batman's shadow was to abandon his identity and never be seen again. Which is a shame because I think he could have done a lot worse than being just like Batman. Okay, that's it for this week's essay. If you liked the video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, tell all your friends about me. You know how YouTube works. If you really enjoyed the video and have the means, please consider making use of the thanks button to send a buck or two my way, because every little helps. I offer channel memberships for $1.99 a month. This will get you early access to my weekly video essay, priority responses to your comments, members-only videos, custom emojis, and an icon on your profile indicating that you're one of my people. Next time, I'm going to continue my look at the DCAU Robins, this time looking at the new Batman Adventures Tim Drake, and how he was one of the most abused characters in the entire DCAU. We're going to talk about his sad origins, his despair over a lost love, and how the violation he experienced at the hands of the Joker would scar him for the rest of his life. Oh, another light and breezy topic then. Hope to see you then.